Hello and welcome to part two, literally just rolling right into the next stage. Um, what I had done was the wet and wet, which I'll link down below just in case you came across that. And then I'll see if I could fit where I'm starting at, what picture I'm looking at, the painting I'm looking at, and then my end result. We were, I think, 30 minutes in on the wet and wet, and the videos are creeping a little bit longer, especially whenever I paint from a photograph or I start doing a study of a master painting. This happened a lot whenever I was doing pen and ink washes of them, which is a great way to learn, or just even just pen and ink, just the drawings themselves. Great way to learn putting everything in perspective and the relationship of each other. I'm using the quill brush to build up this foreground, not foreground, but the closest mound of trees. And there is another little bit that comes out right here, and I will wait until I do a dry off or until this area dries to pass over that. I should have got fresh water, but like I said, literally rolling right into it. I'm grabbing some Ultramarine. Now, I commented quite a bit on how there was really nothing left to the imagination for the painters of the 1800s, the early 1800s at least, or the picturesque painters. I believe that is the kind of worldwide movement for what the Hudson River Valley painters were a part of. So I'm just trying to come up with little ways to get the illusion of all that detail in there. This ridge is higher than it is in the original, but that's fine. I want the glow of the raw sienna. I hadn't used any light red oxide, maybe a little bit. Maybe we'll use that in there to get the kind of terracotta type color. So raw sienna with light red oxide seems to give a nice glow in skies, so go for that off that rock. And what I'm trying to do is kind of get the expressive brush strokes so that it's just not a mass of color. This quill brush is a lot of fun. I got this one off of Blick, I think. What is it? The Atelier number 10. I did start adding Prussian blue. Grab some of that with a bit of raw burnt sienna. I really don't want to change my palette at all with these experiments, but I think phthalo blue would have been fine. It wasn't invented yet, but I think the phthalo is a replacement for Prussian blue, essentially. About that mass that's going to come out there. little too green in the water, but it's fine. Just of note, the simple horizontal strokes used to create that, just to create a flat plane. It's something that I saw Eric Copley harping upon in a short video clip I had seen of him, and he is a modern master of the painting in that time period of the Hudson River Valley movement. I'm trying to pull a little bit of water here. I expressed earlier that I don't like painting around trees, so I'm trying to get in what I can back here. Use my darker marks. Still haven't put out Payne's Gray, but I have a little bit right there, so we'll grab him. And Payne's Gray historically is a mixture of 3 colors. Nowadays a lot of tubes will be just a black and a blue. I'm just kind of grabbing the Payne's Gray because I would think that they would have to have had black on their palette at this time period. And there has to be white gouache in that sky. And obviously, if I'm wrong, you know, please correct me or let me know in the comments, or what you think, or how you would approach this. That mask there. I think I'll switch to the number 1. I'm guessing these are kind of like the birch trees that I had done in the previous video, just in the wet background. I just scraped sideways just to start creating that white texture. If I decide to use white gouache, I think I'll put some in the tree trunks. I mentioned that one of the issues I have is perspective and size of trees, especially at this depth within a painting, that I'll start making them too big. So just taking a slightly different approach to the setup. Put that ridge up and over. And I'll continue using the hake for these, for the foliage. But one thing that I've found is, as you put the pigment down, the areas where it is now is all wet, where I have the pigment. And if I repeat over that spot, you'll lose the texture and definition. So don't be afraid to kind of go in dry, and play around. Grab some light red oxide. And then I just start working the edges of the tree foliage too much. And then it gets larger, and then I start getting trees that I don't feel too natural. One thing that drew me to this painting, was how he had the trees leaning to the left. Put this texture down here. At the end, we'll figure out cows. In the previous one, the one yesterday, I used lemon yellow with my blues to get a green. I might have used sap green as well. I am not sure what greens were available back then. It might have been like terra verte, which I think would just mean like green earth, because I've seen that with the Williamsburg oil painting lines. But you can use the phthalo blue and the raw, Prussian blue and the raw sienna to get a green. I think there's like also a chromium oxide pigment. But if this was back when people were still mixing their pigments by hand, I doubt they would have much, or they would mix what they needed for the day. I'm not sure how it works with watercolor. If they would still have to grind the pigment, and then I guess what they would add it to their binder, the gum arabic. See, that's where the studying gets too much for me, because then I start thinking, oh, I should try that, but I don't want to spend time where I could be painting and learning in that regard, trying to make pigments. Though Lois Davidson and her daughter, I think it's Morgan, I've been doing a family brand of pigments, watercolor. I think they had just posted about their third batch produced. I think it involves the glass Muller, and you have probably a glass flat surface that you're doing that on. Let's see. I'm going to put a little bit of twigs and branches in here, and then I'm going to do a dry off. Yeah, so I think you grind the pigment down. You could probably grind it to different coarseness. In fact, I mentioned Williamsburg paints, and some of their oils have like a gritty quality to it, and I think it's supposed to reflect some of the potentials of different time periods. And you mix it with your binder, your gum arabic. You could put it in tubes or pans. I think Jane Blundell, a watercolorist, and has a great website on brand comparison and colors. I think she's a big Daniel Smith person, and she has her own color. I think they make it Jane's Gray, but prior to that she was mixing it herself in large quantities. So a lot of those colors, they're just kind of convenience colors. There's stuff that you can mix and prepare yourself. Like sap green seems to take place with what is it, phthalo green, and maybe like a burnt umber. An earth tone kind of mellows it out, getting these expressive dark lines in here. Okay, I'm going to pause and dry off. Now, one thing for me is that when I paint, it will take me 20 to 40 minutes for a watercolor painting with the fast and loose and the tonalism. If I'm working on a piece that somebody wants, like right off the bat, just a commission piece or from a photograph, I find that I spend more time working on it. Reason being is I just think, you know, a lot of times I'm doing something from my imagination, and then if I'm doing something from a photograph, there's more stuff that I want to play around with. And since I'm looking at a master painting and doing this, I'm spending more time with it. Here is the white gouache, which I'm putting in now because I can tell that my stamina, my painting stamina, is waning. And I wanted to just kind of switch gears a little bit and play around in the sky with the white gouache. Though my brush and water isn't the cleanest, so we're getting, there you go. And so you can see there how it's muddying up a little bit, but we'll see how it dries. This is Da Vinci brand gouache. Mind of Watercolor is a YouTuber, and I believe he was the one that had the comparison of different brands, kind of like a little study of them, seeing the opacity, etc. I don't think this one had the best opacity, but I like Da Vinci brand for the price and availability. Just dry brush that over. Way too much. We have the white of the paper here. I'm just going to put this alongside it just to see how it compares. All right. Let's track a little bit on that whiter side. It's always weird just putting, well, with white and watercolor, this isn't something that I've talked about in a while. I believe I had read it on handprint.com. I'm going to mix a little bit of raw sienna in this while I talk. So handprint.com. So you see how we can now lighten these areas up. Kind of talks a little bit about the history of white and gouache within it. That's a rabbit hole of information, that website. So even though it has so much information, if you're a new painter, I really recommend avoiding it, because it, once again, like me talking about making paint earlier, it's kind of a rabbit hole that takes away from painting and doing that. Anyway, the 1800s, I think Winsor and Newton came out with the Chinese white, and people were starting to paint watercolors in the same fashion as oil paintings. And I think there was a lot of like art critics essentially starting to write books about how to analyze art, or what the correct way to do it was. And I think some critics didn't find that white gouache was part of watercolor. And then they put out books and all this other stuff, and then art galleries and art competitions started saying if you could have it or not, blah blah blah. So if you like having a bunch of old dead Victorian people telling you what to do, then go ahead and leave white off the palette. Grab some of that Prussian blue. Try to grab some more of that raw sienna, see if I can get a green mixed onto this. I use a little pan to keep it in, because it really just starts to contaminate the palette with its white chalkiness. I think I got a little bit of green going. Yeah, a little bit of variety in there. Now again, that dark green though. Let me move away from that. I think it was headed in the right direction. Now it's starting to move away from it. All right. Prussian blue, raw sienna, going back towards the green. A lot of water on there. Probably be smart to just do a dry off in a moment. Also pull moisture out of the brush. There's that mound that I was talking about, the ridges in the foreground. So I'm just kind of going with that shape and movement. Grass popping up. I don't like this. Dabbing it up. We'll come back over it in a moment. I need to ground that tree in place. I hope y'all are enjoying this. Let me know what you think down below. Of course, you're always welcome to follow along. But like I said, this is a lot of just me experimenting and learning. But if you want to get on board with that, feel free. Let's grab our Payne's Gray. That darker outcropping. Payne's gray, the inner dark of the tree, of the foliage. Payne's gray, gonna get the pop against the white. That shadow ridge from them. All right, let me do a pause and a dry off. All right, very pleased so far with this. I think I want to play around with first putting the cows in. I know I had mentioned earlier that almost every single landscape painting seemed to have cows from that time period, but I do recall reading in an art book that they would have cows or deer, etc., or people in these scenes in order to either show the domestication of the land or the wilderness of the land. But putting these little figures in on such a small scale has always been a little rough. And he went in a little too dark, or she did, but I'm just gonna roll with it. Some Payne's gray for their shadows. There's this shadow of this ridge that they're all on. These ones are almost like ghostly white on the other side. Put some white. I think that this is something that would benefit from literally just taking a piece of paper and just kind of sketching them over and over again with a small brush. Just dropping in these plants that are coming up and over. Grabbing the hake, finish that illusion. We have the darker side here. And I'll go back in them as necessary. Raw sienna. think that what might help me is if I maybe play around with the fan brush there. Let's see. Do I have one? All right, I do. Oil water acrylic. I bought this from Hobby Lobby, and I wanted to play around with maybe doing a video on it. But what a better time than to just grab it and just put it in now. I think the fan brush was originally meant to soften things within a painting. I'm not sure. Did Bob Ross use a fan brush? Stuart Davies uses chip brushes from the hardware store. Light red oxide. I'll put a picture of the finished painting and what I'm working from on the Patreon for supporters to utilize. If you all want to follow along. I think maybe some aggressive scraping. Right. Oh, or is it too late? We do have a farmer right in here. Here is the white gouache for his sleeve. I'll grab some light red oxide for the body. Payne's gray for the top of the hat. I just really need to practice these small figures. They appear so much in these paintings. Phthalo blue. Prussian blue. I keep on saying phthalo. I apologize for that. Let's put him in place. Let's do a dry off and take a look at the overall scene. So I'm pleased with the sense of depth that we got, and I think this was definitely a fun one. There's obviously going to be stuff that I'm going to heavily critique of myself, but I have to remember that we're doing this in a fast and loose approach, and I'm pretty sure he had spent more than an hour on this painting. And the goal is to slowly meld that style into the fast and loose, as well as learn a lot of different things. The ease of the fan brush is definitely helping. The application of white gouache that was fun. I like that. Oh, too much. And if you made this far, blah, congratulations. I hope you enjoyed. And hopefully each time there'll be a new thing to take away. Uh-oh, it's starting to get very Joe Menzish, playing with all this gouache. He's been on a kick with it for quite a while now. We'll sail back here. All right, I think it is time to dry it off and call it. So one last pause. All right, so I'm gonna off camera label the name of the artist and the painting. But I hope you enjoyed. I think that there was some growth from the previous experiment. I did take more time with it. We're pretty much an hour and 10 minutes overall with the experiment. The tree approach, I need to just think of some different approaches and techniques for that. Compositionally, I'm very happy with the depth that we got. The washes in the sky, the gouache was a fun addition, and I think I went even softer with the gouache than he did. It would be nice to try it into the mountains. Playing with the figures is something I need to work on. The mounds and the tracings in the hills, it's something that I utilize a lot, I think, but with this one I could have been more directional. So, a whole bunch of different ideas, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.